Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your girl, Chanel S. Reynolds, and you are listening to the Success Playbook Podcast. Listen, I am truly excited for today's conversation. Today, I have none other than Matt Berndt. Matt, how are you?
I am doing grand this afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. So, to all of my listeners out there who have not heard of this powerhouse, Matt Berndt, Matt is the head of Indeed's Job Search Academy. Yes, the Indeed, Indeed.com, the one that you are ultimately familiar with when it comes to job search. Now, I know you're probably wondering, what exactly does Indeed have to do with the sports podcast? Well, let me enlighten you. So, sports teams and front offices, they're like any other functioning company. They need HR executives. They need salespeople. They need ticket takers. They need people to hire and to keep the building running. So we're going to have an amazing conversation with Matt today about how to be able to put yourself out there and how to strategically position yourself as a highly competitive candidate in the job market. Matt, am I missing anything?
I don't think so. I imagine we'll get into that and more as we chat.
I'm really excited about it. But before we dig into it, I have a little game that I usually like to play with my guests called This or That. Are you down for the challenge?
I'm down. Yeah, let's go.
Terrific. All right. So, for any of my new listeners out there, This or That is a game that allows us to get to know some of our newcomers here to the podcast. I'm going to present Matt with two different options. Matt is going to have to tell me what his choice is and why he chose that.
Should I be a little
So,
nervous right now?
so Matt, we're going to start off with the first question, which is podcasts or books?
Ooh, I like books. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I just love the feel of a hardback book in my
Yeah.
hand when I'm sitting in my favorite chair and I want to while away some time.
I would 100% agree with you. Although we're on the podcast and I advocate for podcasts, I love books.
Well, I listen to a lot of podcasts in my car. I found it's a little dangerous to read when I'm in my car, so that's when I do the podcast. When I get home, it's the books.
So, what are you reading right now?
I have a couple of different things going right now. Let's see. I've always got a big stack. I should look behind me to see what I've got. There's a murder mystery kind of a thing by Don Winslow. He's created a series. It's actually his last trilogy of books. And the one I'm reading right now is City on Fire. And it it originally takes place in Rhode Island. And it's got a little bit of a mob flair to it. Always a
Okay.
little bit of drama, a little bit of private investigator stuff in it. It's sort of a kind of the stuff that I'll go to when I want to escape. But I think Don Winslow's a great author. That's
Nice.
fiction. I've always got like 2 or 3 books going. Something that's going to
Okay.
be nonfiction, something that's business related. I love reading Simon Sinek's. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. The gentleman behind Start With Why. I think he's brilliant. He's done some great podcasts. And then I just got as a gift Bono from U2, his autobiography. I actually
Okay.
learned about that listening to a podcast, and I felt I needed
Nice.
to get it. So that's next on my list.
Nice. Okay. So, that's impressive. 3 books in rotation at one time.
Yeah, I've got a short attention span.
I love that. Okay. Next question, LinkedIn or Instagram?
Oh, LinkedIn, definitely.
Yeah.
I will troll Instagram a little bit, look at pictures that my kids and my wife put up of our dogs, but I'm much more a creature of LinkedIn.
Yeah. So, to that point, and I knew you were going to say that, to that point, how can LinkedIn play a part for job seekers and position them in the right way?
It's a really important part, to be really honest with you. We all exist in real life, of course, but we interact with people primarily, first and foremost, online. And LinkedIn is the place where you get to manage your online professional brand. So it means you've got to actively be managing your profile and the information that you're putting in there, making conscious decisions about what kind of banner image you use, what sort of headline you use, who you choose to connect with and not connect with, what you choose to follow, what you don't choose to follow. Because you may apply for a job or meet someone at an event, but they're going to look to see how closely your online profile aligns with the real life you. So
Mm.
LinkedIn is your profile professionally online. But if you're working for a company where you might be working in social media or might have a public presence for them. How you represent yourself on Facebook is pretty important. If you're on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, whatever it happens to be, if someone can go online and find you, that means they've got a chance to learn about the you put online. And that could work to your advantage when you're looking for work, but it could work to a disadvantage. You put it online, it's public information. You can't
Out there.
complain if an employer sees it and makes a decision about you that you don't like just based because of what you put out on Facebook or Instagram.
Well, I am learning already, and we are only in the gaming part. So thank you for that knowledge.
Sure.
This was great. Okay, so that concludes our game. And I feel like I've learned a little bit more about you.
All right.
So, Matt, when we first connected, I actually reached out to you on LinkedIn, and we had a great conversation by way of phone call or Zoom, I believe. And you were just a kind individual, right? You had such strong character, and I'm a big believer in just having great character. So I really felt it was important to have you on the show and to talk a little bit to my listeners. So again, thank you for your kindness and thank you for dropping by on the show.
Well, thank you. That just it warms my heart to hear you
Of
say that about
course.
me. That's what I try to do and try to be. So it's nice to know that it came across.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with that said, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your exact title and what you do at Indeed?
Okay, so my title is the head of the Job Search Academy for Indeed. I've been with Indeed now for 7 years. I haven't been doing that for 7 years, but I have been helping people get jobs for the better part of 30 years. I started working in university career services in the early 90s. I've worked at universities in Texas and in California. I've also done a couple of stints in the staffing industry, in office clerical staffing and in IT staffing. And before coming to work for Indeed, I worked for a software company that connected job seekers with jobs for about 5 years before that. But the lone string in that is everything that I've done has been around helping people get jobs. So I laugh. I say, at Indeed, we've been helping people get jobs now for a little over 18 years. I've been doing it for 30. So I'm in my nature a career coach. I try to help people, regardless of where they are or what circumstances they're encountering, make the best career decisions they can for themselves. And the Job Search Academy lets me do that. It's really an educational program at Indeed. It teaches and educates job seekers on how to look for a job, on how to write an effective resume, on how to interview for jobs, on how to effectively evaluate job opportunities and negotiate fair compensation, and then how to manage your career over the long haul. The Bureau of Labor says the typical American during their prime work years, which by the way are 16 to 54, but during those years, the average or typical American is going to have 12.6 jobs. Now,
Wow.
many people start working before 16. I did. And there are many people out there working past 54, like me also. So that means 12 is just an average number. I think I'm on job 16 or 17, and I've had pretty stable employment over the course of my career. And I'm not slowing down. What that ultimately means for everybody is that we all are going to go through a lot of career transitions. And we're going to have to manage our way through those transitions, basically drive our own bus rather than be a passenger on that bus. So that sort of core curriculum within the Job Search Academy is the foundation for effective job search and career management. So that's sort of the anchor of what we do. But then we also conduct live webinars. I did one today, actually, on negotiation skills, mastering negotiations for job search.
Wow.
Oh, it was great. We had a Harvard professor involved. We had four recruiters on it as well, answering questions from job seekers live. We're doing another one next week on managing career transitions. How do you know if you want to go from being an individual contributor to a manager, or
Hmm.
from a manager back to an individual contributor? Do you like to manage people? How do you make those decisions? So we'll have that conversation. We're doing a couple later in the year on helping job seekers with disabilities gain employment. What strategies can we offer them for helping military veterans transition from their military life into a civilian role? So these are all educational programs that teach that, but also connect the activities of job search to services that Indeed provides as well. So it's really job search
Wow.
skills first, Indeed second. But we bring both together because we're the biggest job search engine in the world. So we figure if you're looking for work, you're probably using Indeed. That's the long winded version. The short version of it is I connect the dots for job seekers. I'm
Hmm.
a career coach who tries to help connect the dots so that they can get better work for them by their definition of what better work is, not by mine or the world's, but what does better work mean for them and how can they achieve that?
Nice, Matt. I have so many follow-up questions.
Let's go.
You put that so well. Okay. Well, my first question is, you had your first job before 16.
Huh?
What was your first job?
I worked at a Kentucky Fried Chicken. Actually, that's not
Nice.
true. That is not true. My first job, I had a paper route for the Democrat and Chronicle newspaper in Rochester, New York, where I was growing up. So I guess technically I was working at about 14. And so I
Okay.
delivered papers for a couple of years. And then I got a job in the kitchen at a Kentucky Fried Chicken. A family friend owned a number of KFC franchises in town. And I and most of my siblings spent some time working there while we were in high school.
Okay. So on the paper route, were you riding the bike through the neighborhoods?
Depended
Throwing
upon
the
the
papers?
weather. It was New York.
Okay.
If it was the summertime, sure. If not, I have to admit my dad was very helpful, particularly on Sundays with the heavy Sunday papers. He'd drive alongside in the car in the snow, and I would just come pick up a bunch of papers from him, and we would do that route. I had a companion on weekends, but during the week, that was all me.
Nice. And at the KFC, were you in the kitchen dropping the fries and the chicken and all that? Were you the chef? Were you the cook?
Oh, look, I love to cook, by the way. And
Okay.
I think my love for cooking began in a kitchen because we didn't buy all the prepackaged stuff. We literally made all of our own salads, all of that, and we took the full chicken and broke it down and cleaned it
Wow.
up and then cooked it. So I can't tell you what the secret spices are that are in the KFC menu. It's one of
That was
those
my
they
next
tell you, but
question.
they have to kill you. Um, but no, we made the chicken from scratch. So I cooked, I cleaned. I eventually got to the point where I was doing schedules and working the register and work in front of the house as well. Yeah, I grew up in kitchens.
Nice. Okay, all right. So I had to get, because I'm a little bit nosy, so I had to get those
It's all
questions
good.
out the way. But awesome. Okay, so and you told us a little bit about the webinars that you
Mhm.
offer to some of your job seekers. First and foremost, that is amazing. You're offering is it free? Is it a free resource?
All free, and it's available to anyone. Now, our webinars largely, most of the ones that I lead at least, are largely focused on the US market. But anyone can come, anyone can sign up for the live webinars, which we do sometimes via Zoom, sometimes via LinkedIn Live or Facebook Live. But then we always record them. And so they're available on
Nice.
demand as well. So, regardless of whether or not you can be there for the live experience, um, you can still benefit from the information. And they're all free.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about today's session with
Okay.
Harvard. So it was negotiation for interviews?
Yeah, well, it was called Negotiation Mastery for Your Job Search.
Got
And
it.
we were there to talk about how you can best prepare to be successful when you're negotiating, how you can have the compensation conversation when you're asked, how much do you expect to make? How do you talk about non monetary compensation?
Hmm.
And then the fourth topic, because we really did focus on four topics, was how do you learn or discern what is and isn't negotiable with a given company or for a given job? So I got to facilitate and draw out some
Wow.
great experiences from a Harvard professor and four very experienced recruiters.
Nice. So, what are some takeaway without revealing everything
Yeah.
because I really want them to go back and watch it. What are some key takeaways that you can share with this audience to kind of, entice them to want to go back and listen to the recording?
Well, they can listen to that recording, but can also go to the on demand workshop we have on job offer evaluation and negotiation because a lot of the same themes typically come up. Many people get very anxious when it comes to having the salary conversation or just
Yeah.
negotiating because they don't prepare. So the
Yeah.
biggest takeaway was you're doing yourself a disservice if you go in unprepared. And there are so many things that you can do to prepare. You can do your salary research. We've got a salary database on Indeed. Glassdoor has one. PayScale has one. Salary.com has one. In many states, they're requiring that employers provide salary ranges with positions now. Not everywhere, but in places like California, Colorado, Washington, New York City, and other places, they're requiring that information. So do your research to understand what you can legitimately expect for the kind of role that you're seeking with the level of experience that you have in the city or town where you want to work, because location can be a variable as well. So that when you get that question, you can be glad you got the question and you're ready
Mhm.
because you prepared and you practiced. You can say, I appreciate the question. I actually did my homework. I researched salaries on Indeed, on Glassdoor, and on PayScale. And I've done some networking. I've talked with people who are working in the field. And based upon that, it appears to me that the going range for this role at this level is between, and you share whatever salary range you came up with. Not a specific number, but a range.
Yeah.
And then you can say, is that consistent with your recruiting range? Because they ask for information from you. You want information back from them to find out if you're in the same ballpark. Okay. You want to see if you're in the same ballpark. You don't worry yet whether or not you're seated in the same section. If you're in the same ballpark at that point in time, you can say, that's great, because I'm sure that if you decide you want to hire me and I decide I want to accept the job, we will be able to come to an agreement within that range.
Love that.
That's it. You do the rest of the negotiation later, but that early on question is
Mhm.
based upon data. And you're not asking for the moon and you're not asking for something crazy. You're sharing a range that's based upon data and your knowledge of them and your experience and the market.
That explanation was so good. And I cannot tell you how many times I come across people who are younger in their career and they're kind of afraid to ask for that salary, or even afraid to provide a range that they're willing to take because they don't look at themselves as, you know, I, I guess that confident to have the ability to ask for it. They're just like, I'll take what you give me.
See, that's the other side of it, is you have to be prepared to advocate on your own behalf. The salary question aside, when I do my interviewing skills workshop, and your negotiation preparation begins before, as you're preparing for your interview. I
Hmm.
always say there's a lot of different potential questions or ways that employers can ask questions in a job interview, but I think that they all fall into one of four buckets, or the four questions you have to be able to answer. You have to be able to explain to an employer, in your words, why you actually want the job that you're applying for. You need a job, they've got one available. That's not enough. What is it about that job that makes you want to do it? That's question number one. The second one is, why are you a good candidate for the job? What can you share that illustrates that the skills, capabilities, and experience that you offer line up well with what they're seeking in candidates for that job? It's your job to tell your story in terms that are relevant to that employer. The
Hmm.
next thing is why you want to work for them. They know what it's like to work there. They want to know if you do. Now, there's lots of great ways you can research that, whether it's Indeed, Glassdoor, there's lots. Going to the company's careers page as well, reading reviews on Indeed or Glassdoor, or other similar sites, so that you can really get a good idea of what you're going to be getting yourself into if you go to work for them. They're not expecting you to know or have the level of knowledge that someone who's worked there for 5 years does,
Yeah.
but they want to see, they want you to be able to back up that claim that many people make. Perhaps you've said this, oh, I'd love to work for that company.
Mm.
I'd love to work for you. And they go, really? Why? They might have just had a really bad day. It's like, why do you want to work here? They want to know why you want to. And then the fourth one is why you want to work in their industry or in their world. You
Mm.
work in sports and entertainment. That's a different world than, say, consumer products or pharmaceuticals. Why do you want to work in that world? You've got a great answer for that, I'm sure. But if someone's trying to break into that world, which is hard, they want to know that you know what you're getting yourself into and that you understand what it means to try and pursue a career in sports and entertainment. So those are the big four questions.
Yeah.
When you answer those, you're setting yourself up well to negotiate, because you're doing a good job of advocating on your own behalf. And again, just like being ready for that, what's your salary expectation question? You don't perform well in an interview if you don't practice.
Hmm. This is I'm quiet because I'm just like receiving and soaking in all the information. Wow, you're truly an expert.
Well, I discovered, so I got into this business of career services, I said about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's when the light bulb went on for me. When I looked at a job description, I said, I can get paid to do this, because the role that I went into didn't exist yet. So I
Mm,
could not have wanted it. So there's this whole idea where we tell kids in high school or in college, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Or we ask them that question as if they're supposed to know. Because we all know that one person who knew when they were 4 years old they were going to be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or a teacher, and they are. They're
yeah.
the exception, they're not the rule. The rest of us figure it out over the course of time. There's nothing magical that happens when you turn the tassel on your mortarboard when you graduate high school or college that means you now know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. It's a horrible question to ask people. It's so anxiety inducing. I say, figure out what you're going to do next.
Hmm.
Decide what you want to do in the next 1 to 2 or 3 years that will allow you to develop the skills that you want to develop, that you want to use and get paid to use in environments where you think you want to work, and then buckle up and enjoy the ride. But manage, remember, you're the one driving the bus, because that first job that you take will give you the opportunity to do the work and build a relationship and get the accomplishments that will open the door to that next job, whether it's the same company or whether it's with a different company. And when you think about it, many of the jobs we will all have over the course of our work life don't exist right now. So how can you want them? So when I got out of
So
college, I
true.
could not have wanted to work in career services doing what I do, because that kind of role didn't exist.
Yeah.
It came into existence around the time I was in my late 20s. And I'm like, holy cow, I can get paid to do this.
That is so true because my role didn't exist probably about until when I took it.
See?
Yeah.
So what you need to be doing is preparing yourself for opportunity to present itself to you, for that light bulb
Hmm.
to go on. Now, that's going to happen coming out of high school for some, coming out of college. For me, it happened in my late 20s when I discovered this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So if that light bulb doesn't go on for you until you're in your 30s or sometimes in your 40s, I mean, I read biographies of authors who got their first real big book because they had a regular job published in their 40s or in their 50s. That's when they were able to narrow in on who they were and what they were supposed to become. Focus on the journey, not on some destination, because when you're focusing just on the destination, you put your blinders on to all kinds of other opportunity that might be right next to you that you're not seeing. That's how I got into this business in the first place. I discovered that's what I'm supposed to do, and it's been the consistent string across all of the jobs that I've had.
I think that's actually one of the first things I noticed when we talked. I noticed your career path and how everything that you've ever done has prepared you for this role that you're in right now.
It does.
Yeah.
I've joked with a lot of folks. My career makes sense in hindsight. If you look in the rearview mirror and the journey that I took to get to where I am, every piece of it makes sense. If you start reading the story from the beginning until now, none of it makes sense along the way. None of it. Um, until you realize the consistent string that's in there that's weaving it all together. And then it makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that, and I especially love what you said about focus on the journey, not the destination. I think a lot of people need to hear that.
Yeah, here's the trick though. That requires a tolerance for ambiguity that many people are not comfortable with. And it requires a real honesty with self that
Mhm.
can be unnerving for some people. What happens if the thing that you really believe you're supposed to be doing in this world, the thing that you're most passionate about, doesn't pay all that well, and you've got expensive tastes? You've got a decision to make. Okay. A way I've said this when I've talked to college students and their parents many times is I said, look, you're not going to be a social worker and drive a late model Jaguar, have a house in New York and a place in the mountains, uh, and be a social worker unless you marry well, have a trust fund, or win the lottery. because those folks are never going to get paid a lot of money. Doesn't mean what
Yeah.
they're doing doesn't offer great value to society. It does. It just means that they function in a part of the economy where you're not going to get paid a lot of money to do that. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
trade-off. Now, you can make a lot of money as an investment banker, and you're making trade-offs there as well, or in sales. But you're going to make trade-offs there as well. So this is this notion of negotiating with yourself about what's really important. I have
Mm-hmm.
no complaint with anyone who says that they're really money motivated. That's okay, as long as you understand that's going to impact the kind of jobs that you want. I want to make $1 million a year, but I want to be a social worker. That's probably not going to happen unless you write a book and get a TV show or do something, or, it's rare that something like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I want to be a millionaire or whatever it is that I want to do. Realize you're going to work really hard, long hours. Maybe if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to fail a few times before you get there. Uh, Everything is about those trade-offs you're going to make with yourself.
That is so insightful. That is so insightful. Let's pivot a little bit
Okay.
to resumes.
Okay.
You want to talk about resumes?
I love talking about resumes.
Awesome. Well, my first question is, how important is the one pager rule? Or are you kind of lenient on it?
Um, it depends. Of course, that's
Okay.
the answer. That's the way I start most answers. I'll just say this: that's the wrong place to start when it comes to when it comes to talking about your resume,
Mm.
because it's not talking about the content at all.
Mhm.
My philosophical approach to it is your resume should be as long as it genuinely needs to be and no longer.
Hmm.
So how do you define how long your resume needs to be? Well, there's a few different factors. Your resume is not a comprehensive biography of who you are and everything that you've done over the course of your educational and work history. It is not. It's a marketing document. It's meant to position you to potential employers for the kinds of roles that they're trying to fill. So we did a study about a year or two ago at Indeed, and what we learned from that study was the typical resume gets reviewed for about 6 or 7 seconds before the reader makes a decision. Am I going to read on or am I going to move on?
Hmm.
So it says that your resume needs to deliver a very focused and targeted message as efficiently as possible. Now, when I was in graduate school, I was in a class in business communication. And on the first day of the class, the professor said, look, you're going to get 10 assignments over the course of the semester. And none of them should return a paper. They were all written assignments that exceed 5 pages. I'd prefer they're 3. No more than 3. But if you write anything beyond 5 pages, I'm going to stop reading, because you are writing to an executive audience. And if you can't
Hmm.
communicate with them in 3 to 5 pages, you can't communicate with them. Know your audience. And he was true to that. He'd stop reading. And if your closing argument was on page 5.5, too bad. I learned a really, really important lesson in that. So your resume should be focused. It should include the information about you, and that's experience, education, skills, qualities, or characteristics that are important to the decisions employers have to make. And it's most important to focus on your most recent history. We live in a what have you done for me lately world. Why would you spend a lot of time talking about things that you did 5 years ago or 10 years ago, for that matter, if you've been in the workplace that long, when you're not spending more time talking about what you've been doing most recently? So there's the keep it short, because it's only going to get so much attention. It's only focused on the message that you need to deliver, and don't try to say everything. So those are some guiding principles.
Yeah.
That said, I do believe most people can get away, or should be able to get away, with a single page resume to
Okay.
tell a story you can summarize in a single page when you're presenting a resume via email to someone. Because the most important thing is it's helping you tighten up your marketing, tighten up your story, tighten up the story that you are preparing to tell to employers. That's the most important aspect, because when you're crafting a focused resume, that means you're also preparing yourself to interview, because your interview is an opportunity to get into the detail of the stories that you begin on the resume. See, they
Yeah.
build off of each other. There may be some people who get old further into their careers and have a 2-page resume, maybe even a 3-page resume, and it's situational as well. When I worked in higher education, I had a 6-page resume. You go, what? Well, in that world, they expected conference presentations. They expected any publications, in-depth information about, excuse me, in-depth information about my background and my experience and my accomplishments. That's what academics expect. Faculty members don't have resumes, they have CVs that can go on for 50 and 60 pages because that's what that world expects. Understand the world that you're getting into. For most people, 1 page, maybe 2 pages. Now, here's the exception to that rule. When you upload your resume into Indeed or any other system, you can include, it's sort of the endless string of information. So you can include a lot of information and you can go back, and when you print that off on Indeed, it's going to be more than a page because it's formatted for online use and for being functional in applicant tracking systems. So you can have a lot more information there. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should.
Hmm.
So here's my rule. Look at any bit of information that you are thinking of including in your resume and ask yourself this question. If an employer screening candidates for the kind of job that I'm looking for right now sees that on my resume and says, well, that's interesting, but how does it relate to this job you're interviewing for? If you don't have a good answer to that question, leave it off your resume.
Okay. All right. All right. So that was resumes, and
Yep.
that was very well put. Um, Tell me about cover letters. First of all, are they important? Because I have a lot of mentees who just skip right over it, and I try to encourage them to include a cover letter, but they think it's not the most important. So, how important are cover letters?
So there's a lot of not call it controversy, but there's a lot of different opinions in the world of career coaches and mentors
Okay.
on the value and benefit of cover letters. So I can share with you where I come down on it. I think in most situations they're beneficial.
Okay.
Primarily if one of the things that you are trying to do is convince the reader, the recruiter, that you can write persuasively. So if you are applying for a job wherein you will be required on a daily basis to write persuasively, it might be executive briefs, it might be sales proposals, it could be grant writing, it could be journalism, whatever it happens to be. If you want someone to believe you have good writing skills, start with a good cover letter.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, if your job really doesn't require that, you may not need one. If you're a really good software coder, they're going to look at your hacker rank scores, your coding skills, and they're not really going to care if you can write persuasively. If you're going to be an individual contributor software engineer and coding, doesn't matter. You're going to be a truck driver. They really don't care. They may not care in nursing. Well, if you want to get into nursing management and you're going to have to write persuasively there, maybe you do. So I'm a big advocate of including a cover letter. See, what a cover letter does is it positions you to that specific employer for that specific job.
Hmm.
Your resume presents your qualifications for a certain type of work. So this is where I say I am not an advocate of hyper customizing resumes to individual jobs. Personally, I think that's a colossal waste of time. And you really feel productive doing it because you're sitting there agonizing at your computer over which action verb or keyword verb to add or keyword to add at that point in time. And you're not meeting anybody. You're not doing any research on the companies or roles that you want. You're sitting by yourself arguing with a computer and taking up a lot of time doing that. You may need
Yeah.
a couple of different resumes by my estimation, but I don't think you should hyper customize them. I think every application should be covered with a cover letter or cover email, even if you marry it together with the resume into a single PDF document and send it as one. When you don't
Hmm.
do that, I think you're missing an opportunity.
Hmm. That was good. Okay, so we can include the cover letter into the resume document and just knock out two birds with one stone.
You can if you're submitting directly, say, for example, via an email.
Okay.
And that might work great with a smaller or mid-sized company that does not have an applicant tracking system or one that's not using an Indeed. A large company probably has an applicant tracking system, which means they're going to give you the option to upload a resume and upload your cover letter. And what that's going to do is get sucked into their ATS system and parsed. It'll still be there as a full document so that the recruiter can read it, but they're parsing it or taking it apart and putting the component pieces into the ATS system so that they can keyword search it.
Got it.
So it's important that you've got appropriate keywords. Don't keyword stuff. Don't put keywords into your resume that have absolutely nothing to do with your qualifications, because they're going to find out and you're wasting their time and your time. You can't fake your way into a job, okay? So they're going to give you the opportunity to upload those either as Word documents or as PDFs, as individual documents. If you're given the option to do both, add both. On
Mm.
Indeed, you have options. You can upload your resume to Indeed and have it converted into an Indeed resume and have it submitted that way, or you can upload it as a PDF and you can upload a resume or a cover letter as well and attach those to your applications. So you have a lot of different options.
Awesome. Okay. And so let me ask you a little bit about conferences and events that pertains to the industry. I have mentees who may be still in school. They're looking for their big break into the industry when the time comes. And they'll attend conferences such as, let's say, the Black Sport Business Symposium, and they're able to do some networking there. Would something like that live on their resume? Would that be beneficial, or how will we communicate things like
You
that?
maybe that goes. There I
Okay.
am again with my it depends. Is there a story behind it that's relevant? So
Okay.
I have advocated and recommended to students, for example, to list their affiliations. Many of these associations have student memberships. If you're a student member of one of these organizations, I would absolutely list it as an affiliation. And if you've gone to one of their conferences, you could list that on there. But realize if you put it on your resume, someone's going to ask you about it. So
Hmm.
simply accruing affiliations, I'm a member here, I'm a member there. Never been to a meeting, never gone to their website, but it looks good on my resume. You're setting yourself up to be found out because they're going
Hmm.
to ask you something. Remember, anything that's on your resume, an employer is going to ask you about or has the potential ability to ask you about. So I think they can be really, really valuable if they're used. Go to the conference. If there's the opportunity to participate in some kind of way, being a conference volunteer, if there's a chance, if they take student submissions or to get on a panel, if you're serving on a panel, absolutely, because it's
Right.
experience. Um, to me, these types of conferences and organizations aren't about networking, but about relationship building.
Hmm.
Networking gets a bad rap because people just think it's about exchanging cards and being really shallow and just trying to get something from somebody, ask them for a job. But it's really about relationship building. You don't want to ask for someone's help until you know you want it. And they're
Hmm.
not going to give you their help until you've proved that you earn it.
Yeah.
So these conferences give you an opportunity to get FaceTime with people, to ask them questions, not to say, got any internships, got any jobs, but to say, what's it like to work in your world? How did you break into sports marketing? How did you get into sports medicine? You've got an accounting background. What drew you into whatever it might happen to be? And
Hmm.
learn about their journey. And when you're learning about them, they're asking questions of you and they're getting to know your story. So you have to be prepared for this as well. So after the end of maybe even a 10 or a 15-minute conversation, you've learned a lot and they've been able to assess you a little bit. They're in a position to decide whether or not they're going to be willing to help you. And that's when you can say, hey, this has really been interesting. I want to learn more about the kind of work that you're doing. Could you recommend other people to me that I might be able to talk to learn more? Or this has really been interesting. Do you ever hire interns? And if so, could you advise me on what the process is for
Hmm.
that? And if it was a really good meeting, would you be willing to refer me to someone on that team so that I could be considered? How well do you think I would stack up as a candidate for an internship? None of these questions are got any jobs or got any internships.
Mm-hmm.
They're all based upon how can you get to know me? See, people will refer you if they are impressed with you because that makes them look good. It's a little bit of an ego boost. Think of it this way. Chanel, I just met you and you've asked me for a referral to someone who I know really, really well. And I think you impressed me. I'm going to say to my friend, you really need to talk to Chanel. I don't know if you have any opportunities, but she's just the kind of person that you need to meet. If you show up and you turn out to be a bozo, they're going to laugh about you. They'll never take another call of yours again. They'll forget about you, but they'll remember forever that I'm the one who referred you. And every other referral that I make will be in the shadow of my bad referral of you. But
Hmm.
if you go and you're a rock star, whether they have an opportunity or not, my reputation is I'm going to take this call with Chanel because Matt always sends me good people.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going to go, but I know it will be a valuable conversation. That's what relationship building and networking is. If you ask somebody, hey, got any jobs or got any internships, the minute you meet them, you're probably going to get a response like, you should check the careers page on our website or maybe go look on Indeed because they might have some jobs, which is a really nice way of saying, I don't know you well enough to know whether or not I want to help you or invest my reputation in you.
That is so true, Matt. That is so true. Yes. Yes. 100%.
Cool.
So I know we're approaching time, but I had one more question as it relates to transitioning.
Sure.
So I get a lot of inquiries about people who may be coming from tech or, like you said, consumer packaged goods, and they want to pivot into the sports industry. So, what is usually your biggest piece of advice for people who are looking to transition into something totally different? And how do you really communicate those transferable skills into another industry?
Okay, it's tough because you've got to make yourself understandable to people in this new world that you want to be a part of. If you haven't worked in sports before, you can't go into it saying, I want to work in sports, but I want to do it under the same conditions that I remember when I was working in tech or I was working in pharma or packaged goods. It's a different world, it's a different industry. And
Mm-hmm.
it's disrespectful to people in the industry you want to get into because you're basically saying, I don't know enough about your industry and I haven't done my research, but I should expect you to want me because I want to work in your world. And you can't even say why.
Hmm.
So, piece of advice number one is do your homework.
Yeah.
Make sure you know what you're actually saying when you say you want to work in this industry. Then look to see where you have skills and abilities and maybe even relationships that can transfer into that world. People work in HR in almost every industry. People work in accounting in a variety of different ways in almost every industry. Doctors and nurses and physical therapists can work in sports, they can work in clinical settings, they can work in hospital settings, they can work in private practice. Why do you choose the one that you want to work in? My daughter is an oncology nurse because that's what she chooses to do. That's the part of nursing that she wants to work in. You can work in marketing in almost any kind of industry. Why sports? So you need to understand so that you can have a conversation. Then you got to work your relationships and don't just start applying. Absolutely look to understand how the industry that you want to get into describes and defines the kind of roles that you think that you want. Then try and talk to people who are doing that job. If you want to work in HR, talk to someone in HR. You want to work in
Mm-hmm.
recruiting, talk to somebody in recruiting. If you want to work in sports marketing, talk to somebody who's working in sports marketing. Don't ask them for a job, ask them for their advice. You want to develop allies that can help you navigate that transition. And those relationships are going to be really, really important because something like sports or any other area of entertainment is sort of by definition cool and sexy. And people who have no idea what it's like think they want to be a part of it
Mm-hmm.
all the time until the reality sinks in. And you work in sports yourself. You can tell when someone has no idea what what they're talking about when they say they want to. I want to work for an NFL team. And you're like, really?
Yeah.
You don't even know what you're saying. You got to establish credibility.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Because if you get a job, you're going to walk into a world that you thought was wonderful and you realize it's not at all what you thought it was. Or you're setting yourself up for a really, really long um, and painful journey toward not getting what you believe that you actually want.
This conversation was not only enlightening, but it was fun.
Well, for once, for me too. If you can't tell, I enjoyed
Yes.
it. I
Yeah.
just I get energy from helping people figure out what they're going to do with their life. I used to manage an executive briefing program at Indeed, where we bring in our biggest clients to have the opportunity to talk with our leadership and to talk with people in our product teams and the like. And we'd be there all day long in a meeting. And when we were wrapping things up at the end, one of my favorite closing comments is, we all collectively are in what I believe is the most noble profession. From various different directions, we all help people get jobs,
Mhm.
whether we're Indeed and we're facilitating the process, or me, where I'm coaching and educating, or you, if you're hiring, you're all about helping people get jobs, which to me is what I call solving the alarm clock problem. Every one of us, whether it goes off in the morning or in the evening, because some people work day shifts and some people work night shifts, whether it's Monday through Friday or over a weekend, all of us have an alarm clock that's going to go off. And more often than not, that's going to mean we got to get up and go to work.
Mhm.
And life is better when work doesn't suck.
Ta.
Life is good when work is good. And when we
Yes.
can solve that alarm clock problem for people, we're setting them up for more happiness and satisfaction at work, which means we're setting them up to be greater mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, grandparents, because what we do for a living impacts every other part of our life. We can't help but bring it home when we've had a great day or when they had a lousy day.
Mhm.
So empowering people and equipping people to pursue better work, I could talk about that all day long.
Yes, you are truly a treasure.
You'd have to ask my wife if she agrees with that, but I'll take your word for it.
Absolutely. So full of wisdom, so kind. You're truly a treasure. Thank you so much. You're officially a friend of the podcast now. So
All
whenever
right.
you want to come back, our doors are open.
That is great. That means I'm going to have to get it into my podcast rotation for when I'm driving around and get it a little higher up in the rotation as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Matt. We really appreciate you for stopping by the Success Playbook podcast.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.